In every nation there are judges whose names fade into dusty legal records, remembered only by family and colleagues. And then there are those whose names echo in whispers, whose presence still lingers in courthouse halls long after they're gone. One such figure is remembered only by a chilling nickname. He was called Judge Death. From the early 1980s to the late 1990s, his courtroom became a place of dread. His sentences were swift, final, and merciless. The defendants who stood before him often walked in with hope but left in shackles, condemned to die. Officially, he was celebrated as a man tough on crime, a bulwark against violence and disorder. But when one looks closely at the patterns, when one studies the records that were never meant to see the light of day, another story begins to emerge. He was born into a modest family, bright and ambitious, rising quickly through law school, his reputation marked by discipline and precision. By his mid-30s, he was already presiding over capital trials. Early colleagues described him as stern but fair, a man of principle. Yet, even in his first years on the bench, odd shadows appeared. A young man accused of robbery and murder was sentenced to death despite witnesses swearing he was miles away. A mother of two, convicted on shaky evidence, received the same fate. Both executions were carried out swiftly, with appeals denied. At the time, these cases were dismissed as tragic mistakes of the system. But hindsight paints them differently. By the mid-1980s, the nickname had begun to spread. Journalists noted how often his gavel ended lives. Defense attorneys whispered that appearing in his courtroom was an almost guaranteed death sentence. Yet the statistics told a story few dared to question. In his jurisdiction, conviction rates soared. Violent crime appeared to plummet. Politicians praised him. Newspapers called him the Iron Hand of Justice. But behind this image was something more sinister. Files later unearthed suggested that critical evidence often vanished from trials under his oversight. Witnesses who might have cleared the accused suddenly recanted, or never appeared at all. Defense lawyers spoke of intimidation, subtle threats, and tampered evidence. Those who raised complaints were dismissed as desperate, or simply ignored. The first real crack came in 1989, when a court clerk confided in a local journalist. The clerk described a ledger hidden in the judge's private chambers. A black leather book with names carefully listed, each accompanied by strange symbols and figures. The clerk claimed the book contained both the names of the condemned and the amounts of money tied to their sentencing. Weeks later, that clerk was gone. Official reports said he resigned suddenly and moved abroad. His family insists he never contacted them again. Financial records tell their own story. In the 1990s, investigators traced funds moving through offshore accounts linked to shell companies. Many of those accounts were connected to businesses profiting from prison labor. Rumors swirled that Judge Death received payments each time a new prisoner entered the system, and even greater payments when those cases ended with executions. Darker whispers suggested something worse, that executions provided a steady supply of bodies for organ trafficking rings operating in secret. There was never proof, only fragments, an intercepted letter here, a coded bank transfer there. But the speculation has never died. Families of the executed often tried to appeal, but their efforts met stone walls. Lawyers willing to fight found themselves disbarred, their careers destroyed. Journalists digging too deep lost their jobs, or their lives in sudden accidents. It became dangerous to even speak his name. One of the most haunting cases was that of Samuel Ortega, a factory worker accused of murdering his employer. The evidence was thin, no weapon ever recovered, and multiple witnesses swore Ortega was with them the night of the crime. But Judge Death dismissed the testimony as unreliable, accusing the witnesses of lying. Ortega was executed within the year. Years later, new evidence surfaced pointing to the employer's own family in a financial dispute, but by then it was far too late. Ortega's children grew up orphans, carrying his name in silence. Another was the case of Marlene Carter, a schoolteacher accused of poisoning her husband. Toxicology reports were inconsistent, pointing more toward accidental illness than deliberate poisoning. Yet the judge pressed forward, declaring her a danger to society. Her appeals were blocked, her execution carried out in 1992. Decades later, Medical experts reviewing the case concluded her husband likely died from undiagnosed heart failure. Cases like these formed a chilling pattern. The vulnerable, the poor, the politically inconvenient, all finding themselves before Judge Death, and all sharing the same fate. By the late 1990s, his reputation was legendary. Some hailed him as a savior, a man who kept the streets safe. Others whispered of corruption, of bodies piling up to serve unseen masters. In 1997, a reporter named Daniel Harper began publishing a series of articles titled The Judge Death Files. Harper claimed to have obtained documents linking the judge directly to secret payments from corporations with ties to private prisons. He spoke of the mysterious Black Ledger and of witnesses ready to testify. But before his investigation reached its peak, Harper was found dead in what authorities called a car accident. His files vanished from his office, his sources disappeared. His death silenced the investigation, but the rumors only grew louder. Then, in 1998, without warning, Judge Death resigned. No explanation was given. Officially, he retired due to health concerns. But in truth, no one has seen him since. Some say he fled abroad under a new identity. Others believe he was silenced by the very networks he once served, deemed too dangerous to be left alive. In the decades that followed, fragments of evidence continued to surface. Bank transfers linked to his family, coded correspondence between businessmen, and references to what appeared to be his secret accounts. Yet nothing has ever been proven in a court of law. His name remains absent from official scandals, preserved in silence. But to the families of those executed under his gavel, the story is very different. They believe their loved ones were not victims of crime, but of a conspiracy fueled by power and money. They believe Judge Death was not merely a harsh man, but a willing participant in a machine of corruption, feeding human lives into its gears. Today, whispers of his courtroom linger like a stain. Former attorneys still speak of the coldness in his gaze, the way his sentences fell with a finality that felt rehearsed, predetermined. Court records show his conviction rates were nearly perfect, but in truth, perfection only hides manipulation. What happened to Judge Death after his resignation remains one of the great unanswered questions. Did he live out his final years in exile, wealthy and unpunished? Or did his secrets catch up with him, erased by the very forces that once protected him? The truth may never be known. But in the silence left behind, one thing remains certain. His victims never received justice. Their names live on, not in the headlines of the past, but in the stories carried by their children and grandchildren. For them, the echoes of the gavel are not a memory, but a wound. And so the legend of Judge Death endures. A man who turned the scales of justice into a marketplace. A man who proved that even in the places meant to uphold fairness, darkness can thrive. His courtroom is gone, his chambers empty. But in the whispers of the law, in the fears of those who remember, Judge Death still presides. They say justice is blind, but in his court, justice had a price. And for those who stood before him, the price was always death.